Now, the rest of the story. Anyone in the lobby of the Hotel Philadelphian that morning? Anybody might have looked into Wally's eyes as he stood at the registration desk, or as he walked across to the elevator and got in. And there, in the hollow stare, a passerby would surely have seen the anguish, the desperation, the hopelessness. But if anyone saw, nobody understood, or at least cared enough to stop Wally and ask him what was the matter. The elevator rose, the door opened. Wally, clutching a briefcase under one arm, fumbled for his room key. Moments later, he was sitting in a chair in the solitude of his room. Amid the torrent of confused thoughts and emotions rushing through Wally's brain, one grim realization: he had worked all of his life for nothing. Growing up, he'd been taught that one was rewarded in direct proportion to one's efforts, that accomplishment was simply a matter of working a little harder than the next fellow. But the real world does not always comply with the platitudes. Wally had learned that success comes by accident, as often as not, that it's possible to devote one's self completely to an objective only to discover at the end of the road that he has been utterly wasting his time. As for Wally, this was the end of the road. Because he had tried his best and had had enough, all that remained was the way out. Anxious hours passed, and it was evening before Wally finally opened his briefcase and removed the vial of potassium cyanide. An experienced chemist, Wally knew that this toxic chemical could be made even more toxic when combined with an acid, so Wally brought a lemon, the juice from which he now squeezed into a glass. It would be over in moments, immediate unconsciousness, convulsions, and death. But Wally was not afraid now. Even the despair was gone. For the first time in a long time, he knew peace. That evening, the hotel manager found Wally in his room lying dead on the floor. Police were summoned. Family and friends were notified. Many who had known sensitive Wally Carruthers were not much surprised. He had battled depression most of his life. And then, of course, there was his obsession. His obsession that his life's work was all for nothing. He truly, deeply believed himself an utter failure at 41. And yet what Wally Carruthers saw as the bitter end was in fact the darkness before the dawn of what might have been his brightest tomorrow. For not 3 weeks before his lonesome death in a Philadelphia hotel room, Wally had applied for a patent. That patent, number 2130948, was awarded to him posthumously. Wallace Hume Carruthers had unknowingly created a world that he would never see. Myopic from self-doubt and despondency, he perceived himself and his work as worthless, never bothering to hope, never imagining that one day, less than 3 years away, his patent, number 2130948, would be deemed historic. Historic. Nor that he who thought he was finished at 41 would be hailed as the father of nylon. Now you know the rest of the story.
And now the rest of the story. You know, I think we've all experienced what Wally experienced. Mr. Harvey said that Wally grew up believing that one was rewarded in direct proportion to one's efforts. If only that were true. Mr. Harvey also explained that Wally eventually believed that success comes by accident as often as not. I don't think Dr. Carruthers gave himself enough credit. By all accounts, Dr. Carruthers was a brilliant research chemist. That was a quote. A year before his death, Dr. Carruthers was accorded the highest honor that can be given an American scientist, election to the National Academy of Science. He was a member of the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the American Chemical Society, as well as a number of British, German, and Swiss scientific societies. He was associate editor of the Journal of the American Chemical Society and a prolific contributor of chemical research papers to chemical publications. Since 1928, he had been working for the DuPont company as a research chemist. While at DuPont, he perfected important new methods of synthesizing rubber. The title of genius is used far too freely these days, but it certainly suits Dr. Carruthers. Prior to joining DuPont, Dr. Carruthers taught chemistry at the University of Illinois and at Harvard. While a student at the University of Illinois, the would-be doctor taught the senior course in chemistry, the same class he was also taking as a student. He was just that brilliant. It was while Dr. Carruthers was teaching at Harvard that he began to delve into polymerization. In 1928, DuPont offered Dr. Carruthers the position as head of the fundamental research program into organic chemistry. Dr. Carruthers agreed only because at DuPont he had facilities for carrying out his research that would have been impossible to duplicate in most university laboratories. His first work at DuPont was on the polymerization of acetylene and its derivatives, which led to neoprene, the first commercially successful synthetic rubber. Neoprene is generally stronger and harder than natural rubber and more resistant to water, oils, and solvents. We use neoprene products in our everyday lives. Because neoprene is flexible and able to maintain its shape over time, it can be used to make padding for wrist and knee orthopedic braces. Laboratory personnel who handle chemicals may use synthetic rubber gloves made of neoprene, which tend to offer good pliability, finger dexterity, high density, and tear resistance to protect their hands from extended chemical contact. Gloves made with neoprene can help protect the wearer's hands from hydraulic fluids, gasoline, alcohols, organic acids, and alkalis. Due to its abrasion, tear, oil, and weather-resistant properties, neoprene rubber is used to make auto parts such as fan belts, hose covers, shock absorber seals, and braking and steering system components. Neoprene fabrics are also commonly used to make car seat covers. Neoprene is used to make wetsuits and fly fishing waders because it helps provide insulation against the cold. Neoprene's cushioning abilities make it ideal for laptop sleeves and protection for other electronics. It's also used for exercise equipment as a soft coating for hand weights. There is no way Dr. Carruthers could have foreseen how much we rely on his product neoprene. During his 9 years at DuPont, he published 31 papers in the field of polymerization and experimented in the broad areas of polyesters, hydrocarbons, and polyanhydrides. A year before his death, Dr. Carruthers was elected to the National Academy of Science, partly in recognition for his work in making a high-quality synthetic rubber from coal, tar, limestone, salt, and water. He and two colleagues, Drs. Frederick B. Downing and Ira Williams, were refining the process to a point where it would be satisfactory for use in the manufacture of automobile tires. DuPont built a factory in Deepwater, New Jersey to produce the rubber for other markets. Shortly after his election to the National Academy of Science, according to his co-workers, Dr. Carruthers suffered a nervous breakdown and had been unable to work for some time. For at least a decade, Dr. Carruthers had suffered with severe bouts of debilitating depression, which could last for weeks. As early as 1931, Dr. Carruthers kept a capsule of cyanide attached to his pocket watch chain. One day in 1934, Dr. Carruthers didn't show up for work. He had seemingly disappeared. Co-workers eventually found Dr. Carruthers in a small psychiatric clinic in Baltimore, Maryland. In a bout of depression, Dr. Carruthers drove to Baltimore seeking help from a psychiatrist. Dr. Carruthers' depression was so severe that the psychiatrist admitted him to the hospital, possibly against his will, because he feared Dr. Carruthers would commit suicide if he let him leave. 3 years later, on Wednesday, April 28, 1937, Dr. Carruthers left his home in Wilmington, Delaware, drove the 40 miles to Philadelphia, and checked into the 10-story Hotel Philadelphia. Today, Hotel Philadelphia is called Chestnut Hall. Dr. Carruthers' wife, Helen, told investigators that Dr. Carruthers had left their home in Wilmington for an undisclosed location. He told her it would only be a short trip. She expected him to return the following night. On Thursday afternoon, April 29th, the occupant of the adjoining hotel room heard groans coming from Dr. Carruthers' room. He called Daniel Crawford, the hotel's manager, and Daniel knocked on the door but got no answer. Finally, he forced the locked door open and found Dr. Carruthers lying dead on the floor. Daniel immediately called the police. Investigators found a glass which contained traces of poison and the squeezed lemon Mr. Harvey told us about lying next to his body. They found no suicide note and saw no immediate reason why Dr. Carruthers committed suicide. They learned from Dr. Carruthers' associates at the DuPont Experiment Station at Wilmington that Dr. Carruthers had been ill for the past year and had been unable to do active work for several months. Dr. Carruthers never heard the name that his product would be known by around the world, nylon. The name nylon and an assessment of the effect nylon would eventually have on society was announced at a New York Herald Tribune forum at the soon-to-be-opened New York World's Fair on October 28, 1938, a year and a half after he committed suicide. Today, nylon is considered by many as the most useful synthetic material, with applications varying from use in our daily lives to major industries. Nylon is used to make many items including book bags, shirts, underwear, swimwear, foundation garments, wedding gowns and bridal veils, backpacks, flak jackets, athletic shoes, ponchos, umbrellas, camera cases, swimsuits, socks, conveyor belts, seat belts, parachutes, airbags, nets, ropes, tarpaulins, thread, tents. The list just keeps on going. Despite all his successes, Dr. Carruthers was ultimately a victim of depression. Millions of people around the world are suffering from severe depression, and as we learned in this episode, it can have serious and sometimes fatal consequences. It causes severe symptoms that affect how a person feels, thinks, and handles daily activities such as sleeping, eating, or working. Depression can affect people of all ages, races, ethnicities, and genders. If you're a human, you're susceptible to depression. Now, here are a few tips to help combat depression. Try to get physical activity. Just 30 minutes a day of walking can boost your mood. Try to maintain a regular bedtime and wake-up time. Eat regular, healthy meals. Break up large tasks into small ones. Do what you can as you can. Decide what must get done and what can wait. Try to connect with people. Talk with people you trust about how you're feeling. Delay making important decisions such as getting married, getting divorced, changing jobs until you feel better. Discuss decisions with people you know well. Avoid using alcohol, nicotine, or drugs, including medications not prescribed to you. Alcohol is a depressant. If you need help with depression, contact your general practitioner. Just remember, whether you know it or not, people care about you. Your family, friends, neighbors, co-workers. Although they may not show it all the time, they care about what happens to you. No matter what, we must continue to believe that better days are always ahead. Don't you think? I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching, and be sure to take care of yourself, because now you know the rest of the story.